Hi, everyone. This is Cristie from the Million Cat Challenge team. Some of you may have exchanged emails with me. I'm here today to introduce you to our wonderful speaker and to thank you so much for coming here for our webinar with Dr. Cristie Kamiya of Humane Society Silicon Valley on one shelter's journey to save more feline lives. Before we begin, we would like to thank Maddie's Fund for hosting this webinar and for making the Million Cat Challenge possible through their generosity. Their commitment to animals was inspired by the unconditional love of a very special dog, so we also want to say thanks to Maddie. One other little bit of housekeeping. During the webinar, please enter any questions that you might have for Dr. Kamiya in the Q&A box that's in the left-hand column. Enter them throughout the presentation. Don't wait and enter them all at the end. That gives us a chance to get them in the queue for Dr. Kamiya. And please do add questions. We have left time at the end to answer those, and we would really like to get them. The Humane Society Silicon Valley has become a national leader in sheltering, particularly for their Who Rescued Who initiative, along with their groundbreaking marketing efforts, including the now infamous and my personal favorite, Eddie the Terrible. We're here today to learn about another trail they've been blazing, feline life-saving. Dr. Cristie Kamiya joined Humane Society Silicon Valley as Vice President of Medical Operations in November of 2012. For over a year prior to this role, she spent Saturdays in HSSV's surgery suite as a contract veterinary surgeon. In 2014, she stepped into the role of Chief of Shelter Medicine, overseeing shelter and medical operations. Prior to her time at HSSV, Dr. Kamiya worked as a shelter veterinarian in humane societies, municipal shelters, and rescues in the Denver, Boulder areas of Colorado, the greater Phoenix metro area of Arizona, and Northern California. She is one of just a handful of residency-trained shelter veterinarians in the country. Dr. Kamiya enjoys traveling and volunteering with organizations that provide veterinary support for underserved areas in the U.S. and internationally. In her free time, which it doesn't sound like she has a great deal of, but we're pleased that she has any at all, Dr. Kamiya delights in fostering underage shelter kittens. Of course she does, as our photograph of her so beautifully proved. Thank you so much for sharing your time and experience with us here today, Dr. Kamiya.
Thank you so much for having me. All right. So we're going to get started now. This is one shelter's journey to save more feline lives. Again, I'm Dr. Cristie Kamiya, Chief of Shelter Medicine and at the Humane Society Silicon Valley. And I started at HSSV about 3.5 years ago. And since that time, we've been working pretty actively on the guidelines, on the ASV guidelines, and just trying to get more trying to get better at sheltering and, being able to save more lives, doing things a little bit more efficiently. Who we are. So the Humane Society Silicon Valley, we are a privately funded shelter with one animal care contract with the city of Sunnyvale. We're located in Santa Clara County, and that's the southern part of the San Francisco Bay Area. We take in about 6,000 animals per year, and about 3,700 of those are cats. And our primary sources of animals in intake are strays from the city of Sunnyvale, owner surrenders, and transfers. And we do occasionally see the wildlife, especially during the spring and summer. We are in a 49,000 square foot main location. That's our animal care center in Milpitas. In addition, we have 3 neighborhood adoption centers, and those are located inside Petco and PetSmart stores. HSSV is part of a larger community of shelters. We're part of the We Care Alliance, which is comprised of the 6 main shelters in Santa Clara County. And the purpose of this coalition is to end homelessness and prevent unnecessary euthanasia. In 2012, our coalition received the Maddie's Life-Saving Award for achieving 100% save rate for all healthy animals. And since that time, we've been saving 100% of our healthies. HSSV is pretty unique. Our part in this community alliance is mainly as a safety net for other shelters. We are the largest shelter in the county, and we also have the most resources to healthy animals. And because we are saving all of the healthies, the animals that need the help the most are the ones that are, they need medical or behavioral help. And so most of the transfers that we do bring into our shelter need some level of medical or behavioral care. As I've mentioned before, we've been actively working on the guidelines, and there are a lot of resources out there already, through the ASB, the Million Cat Challenge, Maddie's Fund, the University of Florida Shelter Medicine Programs. There's a ton of information out there for shelters to access information on how to do things better. At HSSV, we are very, very fortunate that we have a supportive community that believes in our mission and the work that we do. And so as such, we have this responsibility to ensure that we're maximizing our effectiveness with these finite resources and being able to save as many lives as we can. And that's part of going through the ASV guidelines. And we are, we've been working on that actively for a number of years, and we're very close to being able to say that we have achieved every single guideline in the Association of Shelter Veterinarians guidelines. In fact, we're probably about 94% of the way there in being able to, checking everything off. And by this time next year, we will have completed all of it. So for this talk, wrong slide. So for this talk, what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about the highlights of what we're doing in-house to expand our life-saving capacity in our most vulnerable populations. And those two populations for us that are most vulnerable are underage kittens and community cats. And so we're going to go through the 5 initiatives, and we're going to highlight some of the first three initiatives: the alternatives to intake, managed admission, and capacity for care. So our first couple of case studies are alternatives to intake. And this is the best case scenario for any shelter animal, to not ever step foot in the shelter to begin with. And so we spend quite a bit of time here trying to do that. We've been very fortunate to set aside some additional resources into our intake team and expand that a little bit in order to be able to focus on some of the shelter diversion type programs. The first one that I want to talk about is our Pet Pantry. So our Pet Pantry program is specifically to prevent homelessness of animals, a lot of cats, because they can't be fed. These are geared for people or for families who are going through tough times. They may have some unanticipated expenses, family expenses, and they may need some short-term help. But the purpose of this is if all they need is a bag of cat food every month, and that's going to keep their pet in a home, that's what we want. So this program is open to all Santa Clara County pet owners. And we also provide support to colony caregivers, to our community cat colony caregivers. A lot of our the colony caretakers, they will feed these community cats out of their own pocket, and sometimes that can also be a challenge for them, and so we offer support for those folks as well. We do have some ground rules to participate in this program, however. Pets must be spayed and neutered, and if there are barriers to getting that done, we will provide those services at no cost. And during the time that they are receiving services through the pet pantry, we do request that they don't acquire any additional animals. But other than that, you know, they're able to come and pick up dog food, cat litter when they need it. In this past year, we've distributed about 31,000 pounds of dry food and about 10,000 cans of wet food and almost a couple of hundred pounds of litter. And we provide services for 344 families and about 127 for community cat colonies. So this is a pretty successful program, very important to us. Most of the food that we receive through the pet pantry are from donations, and these are private donations. These are corporate donations, and we also have a Amazon wish list where people can purchase and they get delivered directly to us for this program. The next program that we have that are alternatives to intake is our PUP program. This is preventing unwanted pregnancies. And this is geared towards the accidental litters that sometimes happen. And usually how this gets started is a family brings in a litter of kittens. And whenever people bring animals in here, we start a conversation to find out what's going on, what the reason is for relinquishment, and that's when we usually find out, oh, they have mom at home and this was just an oopsie litter. And the way this program works is we ask the owners to take the kittens back and allow the kittens to grow up with mom in their home. In exchange for that, we will provide the medical care, we'll provide the vaccines and deworming, and food through the pet pantry if necessary. And when the kittens are old enough, we will put them into our adoption program. We'll do the spay and neuter and put them up for adoption, and in exchange, we will spay mom, and sometimes dad and aunties and uncles, if they're also still in a home, we will get them spayed, neutered, and vaccinated for free. And this prevents that cycle of repeat litters that come through our doors for you know, every kitten season. And so this is also a very successful program. And sometimes during kitten season, when we have a really, really high number of kittens in our shelter already, we will do the surgery and send the kittens back and have kittens adopted out of their home, or we may help the owners find kittens find homes on their own as well. And those are also the best case scenarios because we end up with a length of stay of 0 for these kittens, and they find a home without ever having to enter foot into our adoption center. So that's a really successful program. We do probably about 50 litters every year. So these are our alternatives to intakes. So we'll move to the next initiative, which is managed admission. As I mentioned earlier, we have 3 ways that animals come through our doors. We have 3 intake paths. One we don't necessarily have control over, that is our stray animals. They're just going to come in when they come in. But we do have control over 2 other populations, and one of that is our owner surrenders, and the other is transfers from other shelters. The bulk of our intake come from other shelters, mainly from our partner shelters within the We Care Coalition, but also outside the coalition. And we have a couple of different programs, but the managed admission really is to minimize the time that the animals are spending sitting here waiting for services. So the first step with a relinquishment, and the first point of contact is usually a phone call. Sometimes they show up, and we start a conversation with them. You know, we don't just take everybody in. There is a conversation, and we investigate reasons. We're always finding ways to go back to, you know, preventing them from coming in the first place. and being able and finding out, are there things that we can do to prevent that relinquishment? Sometimes it's a matter of a behavior question or litter box issues that if one of our staff members can counsel them and walk them through some problem solving, is that going to keep the animal in a home? Is that going to keep your cat in a home? And if the answer is yes, we pursue that route. Again, preventing them from coming in, that's the ideal situation. But the main thing is starting the conversation. That is probably the most important point. Is you don't just want to open your doors freely. You really want to figure out why these animals are coming in. So once we do figure out that an animal truly needs to be relinquished, and this is, we'll talk about our owner surrenders in the next slide, we do have a pre-intake process. So the way the pre-intake process works is we don't typically take in animals on the day that the relinquishment is requested. A lot of times our adoption spaces are full, and our shelter's full too, and we don't typically have space. Sometimes we do, and when that happens, we will take them in right then and there, but for the most part, there is a waiting period. And so during the pre-intake process, we will get as much information as we absolutely can. We'll get a behavioral history, a medical history, and then we'll determine what the needs are for this particular cat. Is it an older cat that needs some blood work? Does it need to be spayed and neutered? Does it need to be FELV, FIV tested? And so we'll set up an appointment to have a pre-intake appointment. And this is prior to the cat actually stepping into the adoption center, but at this appointment, we'll do the health assessments, we'll do the behavior assessment, the vaccines, and the retrovirus testing. We'll schedule a spay and neuter surgery at that point if needed. And if it's an older animal and needs blood work and a dental, we will also schedule that. And once those pre-intake processes are done, we send the animal home. We'll send them home. They can be comfortable in their own home until there's a spot open on the adoption floor. And that may take a day. Sometimes that takes a few days or a week. It all depends on what our population looks like. And so it's very variable depending on the time of year. But once it's determined that there's a space on the adoption floor, then we'll set up the animal to come back. And oftentimes, those animals get adopted the same day they show up, and again, we end up with a length of stay of 0, and that is our ideal. And so this is a really great, if you haven't implemented this in your shelter, it's very highly recommended that you do this, because it really does help with bottlenecking and clogging up your flow. We have had managed admission and appointment-based relinquishments for a very long time, but prior to this pre-intake process, what would happen is the animal would show up, and then we would stick them in a kennel, and then they would go on a vet checklist. The following morning, they would be checked out by the medical staff and have all of those things done, and then they would be put on a list for behavior assessment. And then, so every time one thing was done on the cat, then it would be put on a different status. So it's a very linear process that could take anywhere from 3 to 5 days. And if you can shave off just a few days here and there of length of stay of every single animal that comes through your door, that is a huge amount of animal care days that you're saving. And I'll talk a little bit about what that has allowed us to do in a few slides, but that's a huge saving. Even if you can shave down 1 day of length of stay for each animal, that's significant for your entire organization. The next slide, I'll talk about, this is our transfer process. So we have a regional rescue program, and it's made up of a team that goes out and transfers animals from other shelters. There is a similar process where we have trained and skilled regional rescue or coordinators that will go out to the other shelters. They're able to do behavioral assessment and some cursory physical exam, medical assessments out in the field. And when they're out of the field and they're able to do that, and we also give them a laptop and a hotspot so they can access medical records and access the shelter database, they're able to start entering information into our database, or they can start generating animal ID numbers. And so a lot of that information is done before the animal actually arrives. And so once they're arrived here, all of those things are done, and they can move on to the next step in the process. And this is another way to allow us to take in more animals. And so if you look at this slide and look at the number of cats that we've been able to transfer over the last 3 years or so, just by making a little bit of changes in length of stay, we've been able to transfer in so many more cats. We went from about 340 or so in 2013 to now we're transferring over 1,000 cats per year just by making changes in our length of stay and having those savings in animal care days. So those are our two big managed admission programs. And so for capacity for care, this is where we've had the biggest impact. And our capacity for care, our focus really has been on being able to care for, again, our most vulnerable populations, our underage kittens and our community cats. So I didn't add any of this into my slides, but one of the first things that I did when I started 3.5 years ago was we went through and portalized all of our stainless steel cages. And in doing that, and for those of you who don't know that portalized process, it's just cutting holes in your cages and expanding the amount of space that each cat has. And I have to tell this story. It's a funny story where there was a lot of resistance. When I first proposed this idea of cutting holes in all of our stainless steel cages, I got a lot of funny looks and questions of why would you cut holes in cages and cut in half the number of cages that we have? So there were about there were about 50 cages that we needed that would have been affected, and the questions I got was, does that mean we're going to be euthanizing more cats if you're cutting more holes? If you're cutting holes in all of the cages, we're not going to be able to house as many. And I reassured everyone, and I promised that our euthanasia rate would not go down. Or I'm sorry, our euthanasia rate would not go up. That we would not be euthanizing more animals because we're cutting holes in cages. And in fact, what we've been able to do is to save more lives, and I'll talk about that more. But that also ties into all of these different programs that we're doing, because being able to provide a quality space for the cats to live in while they're here in our shelter has allowed them to be healthier and happier while we're moving them through. And for some, it's a little hard, difficult of a concept to grasp onto, but it's really important. You're not going to be saving more lives by housing more animals in your shelter. The way you're going to be able to save more lives is by optimizing the amount of time they're spending in the shelter. Another way of looking at it is looking at the length of stay that they're here. For the animals that truly need to be here, these are your medical and your behavior cases. Yes, you're going to spend a lot more time in the shelter moving through the system. But for the cats, for the healthy ones, where there's no reason for them to be here, except that they're waiting for some next step. If you can cut down the amount of time between each step and cut down their length of stay, you're going to be able to move them through faster, get them into their forever home faster, and you're going to be able to help more animals. So this is kind of what we've done, and what we've been able to do as a result of having a little more efficiency in our animal flow is to save more animals. For the next couple of slides, I'll talk about our kittens, and then we'll go on to the community cats. So bottle babies, who doesn't love bottle babies? This population is probably the most vulnerable population in probably every shelter. They're cute and cuddly, but they take a lot of work, and they're very, very resource intensive. But for the most part, they're healthy, they're very highly adoptable, and all they need is time. They just need someplace to hang out for a couple of weeks, maybe a month or two, to grow up a little bit, and then you have your most highly adoptable animals. And we made a commitment here a few years ago that we would not euthanize any healthy bottle babies because of a lack of a foster home. And so we spent a lot of resources and social media, and we had multiple teams working together to build up our foster base. And we've done a tremendous job. Our marketing and foster teams have done a remarkable job in getting a larger foster base for these guys. And so we've been able to save, we've been able to say that we're saving all of the healthy bottle babies. And this past year we've had over 2,000 underage kittens go through our foster programs, and most of those were bottle babies. And at the height of kitten season, this year and last year, we've had about 600 kittens in foster homes, and that's pretty incredible. And it's something I'm extremely proud of with our teams and being able to do that. We have a kitten nursery here in our facility. In the photo here on the left, that's our Mommy and Me ward. And those are just big rooms where we can house moms with their babies. And we prefer everyone to be out in a foster home, but sometimes we need that overflow space. And so this is a nice, comfortable place for moms and babies to hang out until we try not to keep them here for the entire time that the kittens are growing up, but it might take a few days for them to go to a foster home, but they have a nice, safe place to hang out. And we do have a Maddie's cam in one of these Mommy and Me wards, and so if you want to go online and check that out, you can go to the Maddie's website and look for our Mommy and Me ward in there. We also have a space here for different populations of kittens, and this was a pilot probably about 3 or 4 years ago in, how would it look like to have kittens raised in our kitten nursery here? And initially it started with kittens being brought up in here by our volunteer base. However, in this past year, we've been so successful in building up our foster homes that for the most part, our kitten nursery was empty because they were all in foster homes, and that's our preference anyway. And so what we've been able to do is to repurpose our kitten nursery space to be used for some of our more challenging kittens. These are our hissy, spitty kittens that come in that they haven't had any contact with people. These are probably offspring of community cats, and they just need time to get used to people. And so we've converted our kitten nursery and our kitten nursery volunteer base to then be like a behavior modification center for these kittens. And we've had tremendous success with turning these kittens around. They're usually spending about a week, maybe 2 weeks at the most, hanging out here and getting socialization, getting exposed to different people, and getting them ready for adoption. And we've actually had a lot better success doing this way in-house and rehabilitating these kittens in-house versus sending them to a foster home. And so we're very happy about that, and hopefully soon we'll have some data to share on these successes. Excuse me. So finally, our community cat garden, I want to talk about. Next to our underage kittens, community cats are probably the most vulnerable. A few years ago, we weren't allowed to do any feral freedom type programs and release them back into the community. So we needed a solution for these cats that was life-saving. And so what we did was we converted some outdoor space on our facility and turned it into a community cat garden. We weren't sure how this was going to turn out, and this was brand new, and so we just made the decision to just try it, see how it goes, and we created a pilot out of this. We love pilots because with pilots, you know, if it doesn't work, it was just a pilot, no big deal, we can try something else. So we tried this pilot to create this community cat garden, and the community cat garden was a solution for any of our cats that didn't thrive indoors in the shelter. So these may be true feral cats. They may be some of your indoor-outdoor strays who prefer being outside over being inside. And so we put them in there. And we made some criteria for being in there. They had to be spayed and neutered. And we did ear tip everyone, vaccinate everyone, and they needed to get along. And so we have a whole process for acclimating them into the garden. And these cats are up for adoption, and we'll adopt them out to vineyards or gardens or patio cats or barn cats for any outdoor home. And what we do, because we do a lot of adoption counseling, and we also want to make sure that we provide support after the adoption so that the adoptions stick. We don't want them to come back if they don't have to, and so we spend a lot of effort in making sure that the adoption does remain successful. And one of the things that we do for our community cat adoptions is there is a process for getting them acclimated to their new home. We don't want them to turn around and walk back to our community cat garden. And so we will rent out large, extra large, Great Dane size crates for anyone who adopts a community cat. And we do provide post-adoption counseling for that period, for that acclimation period for the cats. And so that's one thing that we are committed to, is providing post-adoption care even for our community cats. So here's our fun stuff. These are some of our really cool results, and it looks like I'm not able to see my slides. Is there a question? I have a question. Can you see my slides out there? If someone could answer, one of the team.
Yes, we see the results slide.
Fantastic. Okay, I can't see it on my end, but I'm glad you can see it on yours. So
you just say slide to me, and I'll change it when you're ready.
Fantastic. Thank you. So if you look at our feline length of stay between 2013 and 2015, there's been a dramatic decrease in the amount of time that cats are spending in our care. For cat, we have almost a 30% decrease in all of the cats combined in those 2 years, and a lot of that change has been a result of all of these programs and being able to decrease the length of stay for all of the cats. I also want to mention that between 2013 and 2015, we had almost 1,000 cat increase in our intake. So our intake increased. We cut codes in our cages, so our functional space was cut in half, but we were still able to increase our life-saving capacity. If you look at our feline live release rate between 2013 and 2015, we were able to increase from 84% up to 89%. And that's including all of the tiny little bottle babies that we've been able to bring in and save. And so this has been a tremendously successful program for us to be able to do all of these things. In addition, next slide, please. If you look at our URI rate, our upper respiratory infection rate, between 2013 and 2014, it's gone down, or the number has gone down. There's a little bit of a glitch between 2014 and 2015, but there was such a dramatic decrease between 2013 and 2014 that a lot of times our URI ward was being spent, it was empty. And so what we started doing was transferring sick kittens into our program. Some of our partner shelters, if they had an issue with URI, we now, because we've optimized our length of stay in all of our other animals, that gave us the opportunity to transfer in some of these sick kittens. So the number between the number of cases between 2014 and 2015, that went up, and that was because we purposely brought URI into our shelter so we could treat them here and then put them up for adoption. But if you look at the percentage of intake, our URI rate as a percentage of our intake, it has gone down over the years. And we're attributing a lot of that to having a better quality space for the cats to live in while they're here, and that's mainly through cutting the holes in cages, and so giving them more space, but also focusing a lot on enrichment for our cats. So they all get a bed, they all have multiple places where they want to be. And we've also been able to transfer in not only our URI kittens, but we've been able to transfer in kittens with ringworm and treat them here so in order to increase our life-saving capacity. So where do we go from here? Next slide, please. One of the cool things that we're doing currently, as I mentioned before, when you have 600 kittens in our foster program, at some point they need to come back and get adopted. So our next adventure, this is our kitten console. It's a new team that has been created by our chief of operations. And this is a truly cross-functional team that's made up of decision makers from various departments across the organization, not just operations. So we have representatives from marketing, finance, adoptions, medical, intake, foster, and we meet weekly. And our primary objectives for this team is to ensure that our kittens that come through our foster programs, they get adopted before 12 weeks old. Because we all know the older they get, the less cute they get, and the harder it is to get them adopted. And we know that we have, it's not just us. I know that it's pretty common in other shelters as well, where the little 6 to 8 week old kittens, they're like, you can't keep them in stock. But as they get older, it gets a little bit more challenging. And so one of the goals of this team is to make sure that we're focusing on that population, make sure that they don't grow up in foster. And the other thing is maximizing revenue. There is a balance in, wanting to adopt out as many kittens as we can, but also being able to get those adoption revenue. The adoption revenues come back and allow us to continue programs. That's part of our shelter, and so we want to do that, be able to do that. And the nice thing about having this cross-functional team, it's a very, we meet weekly and we make decisions based on our population, based on what's going on in the community, who else in the community is having adoption specials, or what is our intake looking like. And so we're looking at the entire shelter population of kittens holistically from intake to adoption. So we're looking at everything and looking at this huge dashboard and making data-driven decisions on what we should do as far as should we have a promotion this week, should we have a promotion next week, what is everyone else doing? And so it's a new team, and it's very successful so far, and we're very, very happy with this process. And so we'll see where this ends up, and this will likely evolve into not just including kittens, but also looking at all of our adoptions, especially some of our longer stay, a little more challenging pets to adopt. And that was my last slide, and I think I've kept within my time frame that I was supposed to. So if we could go to that last slide, and if anyone has any questions.
Oh, wonderful. You have lots of questions already piled up, ready to go. Just wanted to say what a fantastic job that was. I love how you kept the focus on length of stay, all while talking about your progressive programs, helping those most vulnerable populations, taking on more medical and behavior cases, and taking in URI to your shelter while still reducing length of stay. But as you mentioned already, that of course raises quite a few questions. How are you doing that? And what is this with cutting holes in your shelter walls? Can you talk a little more about why you're doing that?
Yes. So we made the decision to cut holes into our cages. So these are your basic, typical stainless steel cages in most shelters. These are your shoreline cages, and we cut holes in them and put a little PVC portal in there. And the reason for doing that is to double the amount of space that each cat has. We know that cats' stress will have an effect on their health. And sick cats have a very long length of stay. You have to treat their URI. And we know that if you stress cats out, they will get URI. And typically it's the herpes recrudescens that's occurring. But if you can minimize the amount of stress that they're exposed to and give them a nice, comfortable environment, that will decrease the amount of stress, which will then decrease the amount of sick cats that you'll have, and you'll have much happier cats. So if you're doing that simultaneously with working on minimizing and optimizing your length of stay in the entire population, and as I said earlier, if you can cut down at least 1 day of length of stay on each cat, and you have 6,000 cats coming through your door, that's 6,000 animal care days that you're saving, and you can use those days and those resources to do other things. So for us, in being able to save so many animal care days, we've been able to expand our transfer program. We've been able to, because we see less ill kittens here in our shelter, we're able to expand our life-saving capacity to our partner shelters and bring in their sick kittens and treat them here. So it's all very connected.
And so when you cut a hole, what are you doing with the two sides? Do you have the bed on one and food and litter on the other? Or what
Absolutely. So what we do so we know that when you're putting cat in your typical 2x2 cages, it's very, very cramped, and the recommendation is to have a separate space for your food and water dish and a cat bed from your litter box. You don't want to be stuck in a little, public restroom stall and be expected to have your lunch in there as well. And that's kind of what we're asking cats to do when they're in the shelter. You have, in a really cramped cage, you can't get separation between their litter box and their food and water dish. And that's very stressful for the cat. And so what we're doing is by doubling the cage and putting a hole between two cages is we're able to provide that separation. And we're also able to provide the cat some choices in where they want to be. Giving them choice of where they want to hang out also alleviates a lot of stress on the cat. I hope that answered your question.
It does. Thanks for talking about portals. As an open shelter, we take in more than 3,000 cats and kittens per month. We've increased our adoption rate from 4% to 8% and have recently opened a no-kill shelter to feed into. But we have such a high rate of URI among kittens that we have trouble getting kittens into our community kitten room at the new shelter. Any suggestions for a shelter with such a large intake?
So we can't do all of these. All of the programs that we have here, we can't do by ourselves, and we utilize our foster homes tremendously. If you're having trouble treating URI in the shelter, an option would be developing a foster program and treating some of the kittens outside of the shelter. That might alleviate some crowding issues. So if you have too many cats in the shelter, that's also stressful, and you're going to see an increase in the URI rate when the population goes up. And so that might be an option of partnering with other shelters or partnering with rescues. But it's a community effort, and so engaging as many people as you can or as many organizations you can in this effort will definitely help.
Great. It's harder to find outdoor cats at home. Wouldn't that increase your length of stay dramatically?
Yes, it is. It is difficult to find, or it's a little more difficult, yes, to find a home for an outdoor cat. Those are pretty specialized homes, and we do. So they do tend to stay here a while. And it's interesting that you bring that up. And what we found for some of our cats that are in our community cat garden, we do have a limit on there, and we do help colonies that need to relocate. We do offer some support with that, and we have a waiting list for community cats trying to get into our garden at certain times of the year. But with the length of stay that these cats are in our community cat garden, some of these cats, they end up being pretty tame. They definitely learn the routine, and they know who their animal care technicians are who come out and feed them twice a day. And for the most part, when you go out there, even though there's 12 cats, you won't see them because they'll be in their little hidey spaces or under the bushes. But if their person goes out there, they all come out of the woodwork. And the door of the community cat gardens go into our boardroom, and also goes into the administration area. And some of those cats get so tame and so accustomed to the staff that they end up coming inside. And there's even been a few cats who've, after spending some time in the community cat garden, were taken into our regular adoption program. And it's been a really fascinating learning experience for us, having never done this before. And we also will start clicker training these cats. So you go out there and click the clicker, and they associate that with someone coming out there for food. And so it's been really cool. But yes, it definitely is a longer length of stay for these cats because it is more difficult to find homes for them. But we do have a pretty large social media push for these cats.
Thank you. Next question is, we are a small shelter, and your intake process would amount to about $200 for us, and we only get about $50 for an adoption fee. We have to make a profit or break even to survive. Do you have any comment on filling that gap?
Yes. We, as part of our regular intake process, we do all of those services anyway, and so that is built into our budget. And our adoption revenue does not cover all of the operating expenses, for sure. And so we do, like any other shelter, we have a huge development team. It's constantly fundraising to be able to do these things. But for the pre-intake process, for the most part, these cats are going to they're going to end up in our shelter system, and they're going to receive those services anyway. We occasionally will have cats come through where they go through the pre-intake process, and then they go back home, and the owners will call back and say, hey, you know what, we changed our mind, and we want to keep our cat. And for us, that's okay. We're okay with that. If all it took was for us to provide a little bit of basic care and some vaccines and a spay and a neuter, and you're going to end up keeping your cat, that's okay. To us, that's also a success.
Okay, so Angela wants to know, can you share how you manage your foster program and ensure that they're coming back for their shots?
So we have a fantastic foster program here, we have a feline foster program and a canine foster program, and we have a total of 3 people on our team managing everything, managing the entire foster program. But what we've created here are a lot of volunteer leadership positions, and we have a foster mentor program, and the mentors are volunteers themselves, and they provide support, and they provide coaching, and they're able to answer questions to our foster parents. And so we utilize our volunteers tremendously. And without our volunteer base, we would not be able to manage this. But we do have a manager who also oversees the entire program. We do utilize our database to keep track of all of the kittens that are out in foster. And so we do have little reminder cards with, when vaccines are due and things like that, that each foster parent does have. And some foster parents have done this for a very long time, and they're pros at this, and there's not a lot of management that's needed. But we also do have quite a few brand new fosters who do need a little more hand-holding, and so that's where our foster mentors come in very, very handy to be able to provide those resources that 3 foster staff may not be able to handle. Absolutely. So definitely utilize
volunteers are such a great resource.
Yes, absolutely.
So Patrice wants to know, will you decline intake if they are FIV or FELV positive? Will you decline intake if their blood work indicates a health condition or if they have dental disease? And does this apply to transfers as well?
So the way our intake works is our intake is based on what our resource level and availability in the shelter is. And at certain times of the year, especially during kitten season, the wait might be a little longer. So we look at the animal holistically, and if they're an adoptable animal, and we have the space and the resources to do whatever care they need to, we will take them in. So the answer is we don't decline for any specific ailment. If they are a dangerous animal, we definitely will not intake them in. But we will decline intake based on our availability of resources, or we may try to provide some support without them coming into the shelter. So, for example, with an aggressive animal where they may not be an appropriate adoption candidate here, although we can't take them in here, we will try to support them in trying to find another placement for their animal. And we may network with other shelters, or we may provide some behavioral counseling or whatever that's needed. And so it's never just a yes or no answer. I mean, it's always a conversation, and it's always based on our availability of resources.
And who is doing those pre-intake exams? Is that a veterinarian, a technician, or a staff? member?
The pre-intake exams are being done by our veterinary technicians.
Okay. Next question is by David. What about open admission shelters that can't control their intake sources? What do you recommend for them?
So I would look at what your obligations are to the municipality. And for example, for some places where you're required to take in stray dogs, some places aren't required to take in stray cats. And so really making sure that you're able to, you're taking in what is required, that's one way to minimize the flow. And the other thing is if you can't control your intake, then really focus on decreasing your length of stay and managing that, and also managing the outflow. And that a lot of times would require you partnering with rescues, partnering with other shelters, partnering with developing the foster base. That's one of the things that we do as a transfer recipient. One of the shelters that we work with is an open admission shelter, and their intake is much higher than ours, and we provide them with a resource of taking some of those challenging animals, or taking some of those animals that will have a longer length of stay, so that they have a better flow through of animals themselves. So really it's going to be a partnership.
Excellent. So Patrice says, we found that owners finding homes for kittens or puppies on their own are sending them out intact. So through your pup program, what are you doing to address that if they're finding the homes on their own?
So we spay and neuter them. So part of the pup program is that they come in for their regular shots and their regular dewormings, and when they're of appropriate age, we spay and neuter them and then send them back. And that's part of the agreement of getting mom spayed and getting the mom spayed and dad neutered. And it's very rare. In fact, I don't remember any cases where that's happened. It's a very, it's not to their benefit to do that on their own. There is, because it's a lot better deal for them to, to stick with the plan. And so for the most part, we don't see an issue with that.
You're shaping the path towards that outcome you want, and there's a lot more incentive to stay partnered, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are the requirements for people to qualify who want to participate in your PUP program? And is the program open to any resident of Santa Clara County?
It is open to any resident of Santa Clara County. The PUP program is, we open it to dogs, cats, and even rabbits. We've been able to enroll in our PUP program.
Wonderful. So now we are switching gears. We have a question about the pantry. And a few of us want to know where you're getting all that food, and is there an income requirement to get the food, and how is it that every cat owner is not coming in for free food?
So most of the food are donations, and those are individual donations, and there are also corporate donations too. Sometimes we'll get food. You can get open bags from places like Costco and Target, who will sometimes bring their open, allow us to pick up their open bags or return bags of food. We also have other organizations who do pet food drives for us, and so we have partners with veterinary clinics in the area who will have huge bins, who will also solicit donations of food for our pantry. But the majority of them are...
local retailers have concerns? It sounds like they're partnering with you, but do you ever get any pushback from local retailers?
We once you form a partnership, there isn't a problem. The challenge is going out there and networking and finding those companies that are willing to work with you.
Absolutely. So Megan's wondering, if you send a cat back to the owner's home and schedule, say, a dental appointment and they wait, in the home until the appointment? How often do the owners not bring them back in? After the appointment, do they get brought back into the shelter to heal?
So that happens. I don't have an exact stat off the top of my head, but we do have people who change their minds while they're waiting, and that's what we want. There are quite a few people who, once they are given that time to think about it, we've talked to them, we've had a conversation of them and offered other intake alternatives and other programs, and a lot of them will end up keeping their animals, and that's what we want. That's our ideal outcome, for them to change their mind.
Next question is, do you have behavior problems later with bottle babies? If they don't have a mom, I consider their behavior might not be normal later. Would you agree?
So there is a potential of behavioral issues if you raise single kittens. And so what we do here, if there's a single orphan kitten that comes in, all by itself, we will pair them up with another kitten, another bottle baby that's about the same age. But we want to make sure that they have a buddy, another kitten, where they can learn how to be a cat, or learn from each other. They can learn, how to play and bite inhibition and things like that. But for single bottle babies, there is a potential of behavioral issues where they don't know how to act cat when they grow up. But that's minimized through having a buddy. And what we've actually found with bottle babies at adoption age is these kittens are the sweetest, cuddliest, and most highly adoptable kittens that we have on the adoption floor. And usually you can guess those came from bottle baby foster homes.
Really? That's fascinating. All that human interaction.
All that human interaction, yeah, absolutely. Some of these bottle babies grow up with dogs in the house, with children. They're already exposed to all kinds of stuff like the vacuum and scary noises in the home, and so by the time they're on the adoption floor, they've already experienced all that, and so they're rock solid when they get to their new home. Yeah,
excellent point. Question, are you seeing a lot of cats dumped outside in your community cat garden?
No, that hasn't happened, but we have had a community cat who wasn't part of the community cat garden jump over into our garden.
Grass is greener over here. Don't mind if I do. Well, then I think that might be a perfect transition to the next question, which is, how is it enclosed?
Yeah, so we do have cat fencing that is around the perimeter of the community cat garden. So that keeps the cat inside. We did have an issue with wildlife. I think we had a raccoon or something dig a hole under the fence and release all of our cats. But interestingly, none of them left. They all stuck around in the pot, and we continued to feed them like normal. And it took us a little while. It took us a few weeks to fix the fences and to reinforce some of the lower fencing into the ground. And so during that time, we left the gate open, and the cats came in and out as they pleased. And once the fencing was complete and fixed, we just brought all the cats in and shut the door. We didn't have to go and trap anybody because they didn't go away. And that was really interesting.
Well, your accommodations look pretty swell. I don't think I would leave either. So considering that you're stretching and supporting those underage kittens, the medical, the behavior you're taking in the URI, do you know what your average cost per cat is that you're saving?
So on average, across the board, for all animals, it's probably around $350 that we're spending per animal. I don't have that information dialed down to individual kittens. I can get that if there's interest. I can find that out. But most of the cost with the bottle babies are the cost of KMR, the cost of the vaccines, and so because they're spending most of their time in a foster home, there's no additional operational cost to the organization.
All right, so our next question is, for managing intake of owner surrenders, what do you do when there's no room but the owner can't wait for a surrender appointment due to things like losing their home or moving to places where animals aren't allowed?
That's a really good question. So because we are managing our animal flow through the shelter, we're able to accommodate those emergencies. We will take them on emergency. If they absolutely cannot wait, or if there's a dangerous situation where the animal shouldn't go back, or for any extenuating circumstance, because we're not overcrowded, because we're managing our animal flow, we can easily accommodate those emergencies when they occur.
Yeah. Wonderful. Do you intake and adopt out FIV cats?
Yes, we do.
Oh, fabulous. Okay, next question is, do you have people sign a contract for your pet pantry so they agree to not get more pets and to spay and neuter their animals?
Yes, we do. We do have an application process for that, and there are some forms that they do sign, yes.
Okay. I know we're a little bit over here, so I just wanted to let everyone know we have about 5 questions left. If you'd like to stick around, we'll get through these quickly. How much do you charge for your kittens?
Our kittens, so our adoption fee for the kittens is $175. That's our regular price. But over the course of the kitten season, we do run various promotions, and anywhere from free to $10 to $50. And that's part of the work that the Kitten Council is doing in, looking at, well, what is the optimal price or the promotions that we should be running at any given time.
Yeah. How are you isolating the ringworm cats that you're taking in without a shelter renovation? Where are you putting those ringworm cats?
So we do have a ringworm ward, and it's one of our regular holding spaces that we've converted into a ringworm isolation room.
Wonderful.
And
well, here's a hot topic. Sorry.
So it's nothing special, nothing different than any of our holding rooms. The only thing we do in there is that we want to make sure, because these kittens are going to be spending a lot of time in isolation, that we make absolutely sure that that we're keeping them comfortable. So they have beds, and they do have the portalized cages in there. We do have that as well. And we also have a socialization program in order to make sure that the kittens are getting enrichment while they're spending their time in there.
Yeah, and do you allow volunteers in there?
Yes, we do have volunteers. Most of the care of our ringworm kittens are volunteers, so we have volunteers who come in twice a week to help with lime sulfur dips, and they're also helping out with cleaning the cages and doing deep cleans of the cages while the kittens are being dipped. So we rely heavily on our volunteers to help with that. It is very time-consuming, resource-consuming to treat ringworm in the shelter, and so volunteers are invaluable when it comes to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Darcy's wondering, if you get your kittens out before 12 weeks, when are you spaying and neutering?
We spay and neuter at 6 weeks, and a robust 1.5 pounds.
Very good. All right. Last question. Isabel's wondering, is spay and neuter done prior to admission or after admission?
For the pre-intakes,
yes.
For the pre-intakes, sometimes it's done before admission. Sometimes it's done at the time of admission. So sometimes we'll spay and neuter the animal and then send them back home, waiting for a spot on the adoption floor. Sometimes the intake will happen at the time of surgery. So they'll come in and have surgery and then go straight to an adoption floor. It all depends on our space availability.
Yeah. Oh, Cristie, thank you so much for this presentation and letting us pepper you with all these questions. Despite all that fabulous information, we were able to get it right there at an hour and 8 minutes. So thanks, everyone, for holding on while we went a little over, and thank you for all that great information.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. As of this morning, the Million Cat Challenge ticker has clocked over 608,000 lives saved by participating shelters. If your shelter isn't already in the challenge and it has a desire to save even just one more life, We welcome you to join the million. To register, visit www.millioncatchallenge.org. And if you have any questions, we are always here to help. You can reach us at info@millioncatchallenge.org. Thanks for spending your lunch with us, everybody. Have a great day.